Hi. So I'm not actually from Carnegie Mellon or Pittsburgh. I'm from California. But I am part of this community because 22 years ago, my life and business partner, Louis Rossetto, and I created a future Carnegie Mellon student. Our son, Orson, is graduating in May from your fine institution with a degree in mechanical engineering. And thank you. I'm very proud. He made it. So I'm thrilled. And he's thrilled to be here too, because he gets campus engagement credits. So 26 years ago, my partner Louis and I created Wired magazine to cover the digital revolution, which was the way computers and networking technology were going to transform our world. Not just the way we work, not just the way we educate, but everything, our economy, our politics, our society, our world. But like all good, actually, it was the story of our times, and it was called the magazine of the decade. But like all revolutions, it eventually came to an end. It's over. We won. We won the digital revolution. And eventually, Louis and I sold the company and got out of the media business altogether, until now. Once again, Homo sapiens have created some astonishing tools, but this time, it's personal, it's physical, it's biological. So what are we going to do differently this time? How will we manage this revolution differently than the one that came before? And my question for you guys is, are you ready? So we'll do a quick poll. I'm not going to ask you how many people have smartphones or activity trackers. I'm assuming most people do. But I will ask you, is anybody here sequencing anybody here tracking their sleep? Yeah, that's important. Or hacking your sleep. Has anybody here sequenced their genome? Done 23andMe or Ancestry.com? You know, there's now a company that will sequence your whole genome for $1,000 called Veritas Genetics. You don't have to raise your hand here, but how many of you have frozen embryos? This is a perk in California, you know, Silicon Valley companies now, they're increasingly offering that so you can keep working. You don't have to stop to have children. It's true. How many of you are involved in frozen embryos? Has anybody frozen embryos? Of course, if you freeze your embryos, the next step would be to get a little spreadsheet. You'd have a pre-implantation genetic screening of those embryos. You get a little spreadsheet and you would go, which ones look the most viable? Which ones are least likely to have genetic mutation? You know, there's a new technology scientists are working on now. It's called in vitro gametogenesis. It's using human stem cells to generate gametes or sex cells so that we can create a sperm or an egg without having to have a partner of the different gender. So same gendered couples can now create a genetically related child. You know, this is Carnegie Mellon. Maybe I should ask, is anybody here involved in human genome embryo editing? No, okay. But this is the Neobiological Revolution. It's this accelerating movement of technology pushing the boundaries of biology forward. It is self-directed evolution. It is the next stage of the digital revolution, and it is the story of our time. So what's driving it? You guys are all, I'm sure, familiar with Moore's law. But look at this. Look at the cost of genome sequencing. It's hitting the floor. This is going to enable us to sequence children at birth and find out what their genome, what secrets their genomes may have in store for them. We can prevent disease. We can cure disease. But it's not just genome sequencing that's driving this revolution. It's also genetic synthesis. We can synthesize DNA. It's not just that either. It's imaging. We now have the technology that allows us to see inside the body, discovering all new biological circuits and systems we didn't even know existed before. It's sensors. Sensors in our environment. Sensors on our bodies, in our clothes. Sensors in our bodies. And those sensors are generating enormous amounts of data, which we now increasingly have the tools to understand, the tools to see patterns, to draw correlations, and increasingly, causation. So, I would like to talk about the frontiers of all of this. Where are we going with this? Let me just give you a couple of amazing people, companies, and ideas. working at the frontiers of this. One of them is based here in Pittsburgh. It's called Ligenesis. They use human stem cells to transform lymph nodes into bioreactors to grow new livers for people with end-stage liver disease. Astonishing stuff. We've written about a company in California called Open Water. They're actually using infrared light and holograms to see inside the brain at the resolution of 1 neuron. The implications of this are extraordinary for diagnostics, for treatment, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But they're also actually going to be pioneers at the frontiers of brain-computer interface. Imagine being able to think a thought that drives your computer. Imagine your computer being able to read your mind. So I'd like to tell you lots more stories about that. But today what I want to zero in on are the technologies that are going to enable us to transform our species. And by that, of course, I mean genetic editing. So what are attractive genes that we might want to have? For instance, CCR5 can protect us from the HIV virus. That sounds pretty positive, right? What about GRIN2B? That's actually been associated with expanded capacity for learning and memory. TERT, T-E-R-T, protects your telomeres. It's been indicated for longevity. Then there's one called PDE4B, which is associated with low anxiety. Who wouldn't want all of these things for their children? Suppose you were thinking about engineering humans for space travel. Well, turns out there's a gene called LRP5, which is associated with extra strong bones. Or there's a combination of 4 mutations that you can use, which will increase your resistance to radiation. Or you could simply select humans from among your frozen embryos that would more likely have a small stature. You could select for emotional resilience, so people who can live in a tiny little capsule hurtling through space and experience extended periods of time alone, or extended periods of time with too many other people. You know, the point is, this all sounds like science fiction. And in fact, there's been a profusion of books and television shows and films that are us exploring this idea of self-directed evolution. You know, this is a society working out our potential futures. I would just point out, these futures tend to be fairly dystopian, right? I mean, you have the story of, you know, evil corporations manipulating human clones. That's Orphan Black. You have the story of synthetic humans, you know, rising up against their Homo sapien overlords. That's Humans. You know, you have stories about the megalomaniacal billionaire, you know, pouring all of his money into immortality. That's Altered Carbon. I would just posit that it's time for a positive vision for the future of our species. You know, the question then is, can we all agree on what those positive visions might be and how to get there? So I want to give you 3 different perspectives on people working at the frontiers of the future of our species. This is a man working in academia with government funding. His name is Dr. He Jiankui, and he's famous for being the scientist whose work in editing human DNA led to the birth of twin girls in China in November, the first CRISPR babies, Lulu and Nana. He was working on that gene I mentioned earlier, CCR5, and all of his research is around HIV protection because their father has HIV. So that's preventative, right? That's just repairing something that would be bad. Well, turns out the CCR5 gene is also indicated for expanded learning capacity and memory. Did he cross a line? Has he now moved into enhancement? There was an international moratorium among scientists to not do human genome editing, but he went ahead and did it. Is that okay? Or how about this guy? This is Josiah Zayner. He's got a PhD from the University of Chicago in biophysics. He's worked at NASA as an astrobiologist. He considers himself a citizen scientist. He's also a bit of a biopunk, but maybe the kinds of things that he's doing and advocating are a threat to our national interests, or perhaps they're a threat to the human race. See, Josiah thinks that we should all have access to the tools of the Neobiological Revolution, that we should be allowed to do any kind of CRISPR edit to ourselves that we might want. He's part of a community of biohackers who are very interested in reverse engineering drugs like insulin and to make therapies available to humans that the pharmaceutical companies are charging too much money for. He's not alone. This community of biohackers is actually, there's a whole network of bio makerspaces. At last count, there were 169 of these. And you would think, okay, biomaker, the do-it-yourself community, that's probably mostly in America, right? Only 30% of those biomaker spaces are in America. They're in Bangalore, they're in Bogota, they're in Bangladesh. They're all over the world. The point is, these technologies have escaped from the labs. They're written up thoroughly. There's YouTube videos on how to do this. These technologies cannot be contained. So you've got the academic, you've got the biohacker, and then you have the artist. This is Stellark. Stellark has used a scaffolding and tissue engineering to create a human ear, which he's grafted onto his forearm. He's then implanted that with a microphone and hooked it up to the web in a kind of internet of weird things. So he's part of the grinder community. Grinders are people who use technology to transform their bodies. I saw a guy who had made horns for himself. There's another guy, quite a few people actually, who implant RFID tags in their hands, and they could just wave when they get onto the bus or when they have a door that they want to open with a security pass. The point is, these people are really pushing the boundaries of what we can do. Josiah used to joke that when he was in college, he and his friends would talk about building robots and flying cars and dragons. Well, guess what? All the friends in computer science and engineering are building robots and driving cars. Where are we on the dragon front? Can we get comfortable with that? Is that the kind of diversity we're going to be okay with? I'm thinking about heuristics for the future of Homo sapiens. And one of them I really, really hope is biodiversity. And by that, I'm not talking about, people with tails. I'm not even talking about gender diversity. I mean, I hope those things will continue apace. I'm talking about things like neurodiversity. What happens if we eliminate those embryos that might show a proclivity for being on the spectrum, for autism? We could completely decimate our technical community if we didn't implant those embryos. What about mental illness? Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression? What happens if we wipe all those people out of our population? We'll have profound impacts on our culture. So, what is it that we want to become? I wonder, do we have a strategic plan? Do we have a creative brief? Where's the product roadmap? I mean, if you were building a business, these are things we'd be thinking about, aren't they? I like to do scenario planning when I think about business planning. So, what are the key variables that are going to drive the evolution of our species? Technology is certainly one of them, right? Will our biotechnological innovation follow the same innovation curve as Moore's law has? What about in vitro fertilization? Will that get easier, less expensive, less painful, less emotional? What impact would that have on us? How about demographics? The United Nations has population projection models that show us reaching, 9.8 billion humans by 2050? What if we're off? What if those models are off by just a little tiny bit? We could suddenly find ourselves with 30 billion souls on this planet. Would that change our ideas about, let's say, genetically modified foods? Would we at that point decide that using less land and less water and less herbicides and pesticides is a good thing? How about another one? Climate change. Ecological disaster, either from climate change or let's say an asteroid hits our planet. What technologies would we accept then that we may resist now? The point is, we are as God, and we might as well get used to it. It is in our nature to be curious. It is in our nature to build tools. The killer apps of the Neobiological Revolution are going to be gene editing, bacteria engineering, and brain enhancement. But we have to keep in mind the idea that these things are going to be out of our control. My colleague, Kevin Kelly, who helped us launch Wired Magazine, is still a senior maverick for the magazine. published a book 25 years ago called Out of Control. And I want to just read you this quote. He says, "This is the dilemma all gods must accept, that they can no longer be completely sovereign over their finest creations. The world of the made will soon be like the world of the born, autonomous, adaptive, and creative, but consequently out of our control." So, it's time to understand what these tools can do and plan for their impact. It's time to decide that which we cherish and encourage it, and to identify that which we fear and abhor and contain it. Is it possible that we will have universal morals and ethics that we can all agree on? You know, it's the 40th anniversary of the first test tube baby. When she was first born, people were outraged. This is a moral dilemma. This is a technological aberration. This should be stopped. What technologies are we shocked by today that 40 years from now we'll consider absolutely normal? In fact, a human right. Maybe it won't take 40 years. Maybe it'll only be 20. Maybe it'll only be 10. We are not evolution's final creation. I am in awe of what comes after Homo sapiens. And I'm actually thrilled to be alive at this historic moment when Homo sapiens will seize the tools of evolution. But you know, we are at the top of the food chain. Us Homo sapiens, and you, my friends from Carnegie Mellon and TED, are the elite of the Homo sapiens. It's been a great privilege. It's also a great obligation and responsibility. So what sense of responsibility do you feel towards managing our species? I'm just going to leave you with one question. What is it that you would like us to become?